Good morning to everyone once again. It's my pleasure to be here. And I'm going to be the captain of this ship. So, once again, Nunya Afari is my name. Um, I'm known in the corporate circles as Mr. Cool. Maybe very soon you'll get to know why they call me that. But I would not like to waste much more of your time. I would want to introduce you to a few topics that I've been tasked to cover today. So to begin with, we're going to talk about data science and data integrity. And this is the approach I would want us to deal with the topic. Now, when we're talking about data integrity, first, we are looking at, we would want to first of all look at ways of making sure our data has integrity. What do I mean by that? So I'd want to make us first of all look at ways by which we, i.e. the preventive measures that sometimes prevents the data that we are working with from being credible or being accurate, if I should put it that way. So we first want to look at the preventive measures, then we look at the corrective or the investigative measures. So I'm going to introduce you to the tools that we can first use to prevent errors or the data accuracy of the records that we are working with. And before I proceed, I want to believe everyone here has opened or used Microsoft Excel at any point in time. I'd want to believe there is no extreme newbie to Excel at this point. Please confirm or deny if you have used Microsoft Excel before. Is there anybody here who has never used Excel before?
Please, we can't see your full screen.
You can't see my screen. Okay. Okay, so let me share my Excel screen. Okay, can you see now?
Yeah.
Okay, so before I proceed, I want to know if there's anybody here who has never used Microsoft Excel before. Is there anyone here like that? We all have used Microsoft Excel before, correct? Hello?
Yes, we have.
Okay,
yes,
good.
We have.
All right, so
yes, we have.
Like I was trying to give you an overview of the approach in which we want to address the topic. We first want to look at what are some of the preventive tools. And when we talk about data integrity, what I mean here essentially is you have a set of data, you have a set of records, but when we say the data lacks integrity, it largely is saying the data is not accurate, or there are too many errors, or the data is not reporting the way it's supposed to. Do you all understand what I'm driving at here? So one of the ways we can ensure that we are working with accurate data is to ensure that the data that we are inputting is accurate to be able to help us to do the further analysis that we expect to do with the data. Because if you are analyzing wrong data, then essentially you are going nowhere. I hope you get where I'm driving at. So I'm trying to first of all help us to understand how we can ensure the data integrity of the data we want to analyze. So I want to introduce you to a tool called data validation. Data validation. Is there anyone here who has ever heard of data validation in Excel? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. So for those of you who haven't, I want to show you what the whole concept is about when we talk about data validation and how you can, if you are inputting data or you are collecting any sort type of data, how you can validate the data to ensure that you are collecting accurate data. I mean, indeed, there are some errors as humans, we make errors all the time, but Excel has made it possible for us to to prevent some errors. We call them preventable errors. And I'll show you some few examples as we go ahead. So in as much as we are allowed to make errors, there are some errors that you do not allow yourself to make, especially when you know the right tools to use to prevent you from making those kinds of errors. So to begin with, on the first sheet of my illustrating workbook, we're on the first sheet called data validation. Now, in as much as I am going to show you how these tools are used, you would realize that I'm spending a lot of time explaining why I am doing what I am doing. Because at the end of the day, it's very easy for anybody to teach you how to do something. But if you don't understand why we did it, and then if the scenarios change, how you can go about it, it becomes difficult in the long run. So it's important that you really understand why we are doing what I'm doing. So to go over this first topic, data validation, what we are saying is we want to be able to analyze some data, okay? But then again, there are times where the data we are analyzing is not accurate. So we are taking a step back to come and look at the preventive measures that we can take to ensure that the data we want to analyze is accurate. And one of the tools we can use in ensuring accurate data input in Excel is called data validation. So to give you an example, assuming you have a worksheet like this, and you're updating the list of, let's say, employees or students or whatever. So because of this example, we are assuming it's an organization, and then we need to input data in this sheet in this manner, okay? Guys, are you all following my screen?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yes,
So,
please.
so you are faced with a worksheet that you are inputting data like I am doing on my sheet currently. But you realize that you get to the third column, okay? And then this column.
Mr. Koo.
Yes,
please, this is Florence. Can you send me a copy of the worksheet to send around, to just share it in the chat box for people to download and use? They want to follow.
Okay. Okay,
Thank
all right,
you.
I'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so just a minute. Just a minute, give me a minute to share the screen.
Okay.
To share the document.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so to continue from the point I was trying to illustrate, once you get the exercise file, you'll be able to follow at your own time the point I'm trying to illustrate. So I'm saying that assuming you are inputting data like this, you are collecting any form of data. And again, all the data we are using here is for illustrative purposes. So you do not need to limit your mind to just the data that we are using to illustrate these tools that we are introducing you to. So it could be any form of data. And then once you know what you're doing, this tool or concept of data validation can always apply. Okay. So we are inputting data, and you realize that in this third column, we need to input the departments in this column. So let's assume we have finance, sales, and whatnot department. Guys, are you following what is happening?
Yes, please, but we are still waiting for the Excel file.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm sure you can still follow, so that once you get the file, you can be able to get the same worksheet and then try your hands on it once you get the file. Okay.
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 All right. So, I mean, it's important that you understand the concept first before you practice anyway. So just follow what I am doing, try and understand and grasp the concept. Then you can also try your hands on it as we move along. Okay, so based on the data structure that we are looking at, you can see we have last name, first name, department, state, whatever. And I'm saying that if you look at the data in column C, that data is dedicated to accept only the department of the names that we are inputting. Is that correct? So you would realize that, like I was trying to illustrate, it's possible as humans for us to make mistakes, okay? So let's assume that in typing sales in this third column, you mistakenly type sales in this manner. Is there anybody who can tell me or foresee the challenge that will happen at the point that we are trying to analyze this data by making this simple error? Does anybody, can somebody tell me what will happen just by, or let's say we are typing finance, and then we type finance in this manner rather than how finance is supposed to be spelled. This is a small typo mistake that we have made, but it is likely to affect our entire data when we're analyzing this data, because Excel will recognize this first data as a different record and recognize the second data due to the spelling mistake as a different record, when indeed they are all in the same department. Do you all foresee what I'm saying here? Are you getting the picture I'm painting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is part of the problem I want to help you solve. Okay? All I'm trying to help you do this morning is that there's a tool called data validation that when you require to input data consistently in a particular column, you can use this data validation tool to ensure that the data you're inputting in this column is always typed in correctly and is consistent the way you expect it to. So that when you move on and you try to sort the data, you try to filter, or you try to do anything else by way of analyzing this data, you will not have discrepancies due to some of those petty mistakes. I mean, I agree we are human, but again, if you know how to use data validation, you will not be making some of those errors, which is likely to affect the entire data integrity of the work that you are doing due to some of those errors. So how do we go about this? So to insert this data validation, assuming I want to validate the data in this column to always accept these branches that I have, this departments that I have listed here in column K, I'll first highlight the column where I want to apply my data validation, okay? Then I go onto the home tab, I go to the data tab. Okay, on the data tab. Under the data tools section, obviously when you're using a Microsoft, you see this data validation option under the data tools section. Okay. So what you do next after clicking on the data validation tool is again to click on this data validation. And then this will bring up the data validation dialog box. Are you all following? Now, before I proceed with this, you will notice that the validation criteria, as has been set currently, is to allow any value. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go back and come back to this data dialog box. Now, what you see there currently is, what it means is that Excel currently allows any value that you input in any cell, okay? Any value that you type on your keyboard into any cell, whether it's correct, it's spelled correctly or not, Excel doesn't really care how accurate the data you are inputting in. That is why when you go to any blank cell on any sheet and you type anything, whether it's spelled correctly or not, immediately you type in enter, Excel will accept it. So then you realize that this is the cost of our problem. So therefore, we do not want to allow Excel to accept any type of input except the designated input that we expect it to accept in this department column. Are you getting the picture? Because by default, Excel allows you to enter any value on any cell and Excel will allow it. But we, however, want to change that. So how do we change that? So like I said, you go onto the data tab, highlight the session that you want to validate, go onto the data tab, go to data validation and click on data validation. So then this brings up the data validation dialog box, okay? And instead of allowing Excel to accept any value, if I click on this drop down, I have the option of providing a specific list. So that is what I'm going to choose. I'll choose the option list. What this means is that I'm telling Excel, okay, for the section that I have highlighted, I'm not expecting you to allow any input into that cell except the specific list that I'm going to provide you with. Are you all following? So immediately I select list, you'll be giving another option to provide the source of the list that you want Excel to accept anytime you are inputting data in this cell. And one way of inputting the source data or the list of data that you want Excel to accept for this range of cells is to click on the source button. If you have the list of options typed in your Excel like I have here already, I can just quickly go onto my Excel sheet and drag and highlight the accepted list of inputs that are accepted in this department column. You see, if you do not understand why we are doing this, this might get confusing. But if you understand why we are doing what you are doing, you would easily follow what I am trying to say here. So all we're saying is that Excel should allow only this list of departments that we have in the organization, okay? And then when we are done, we say, okay. And then that is it. You'll notice that if I put my cursor here, you don't see any drop down. But if I put my cursor here, you see a small drop down begins to appear in the list of validated cells. So this way, you have the option of clicking on this drop down, and you notice that the departments that we validated to input here automatically now begin to appear in the drop down. And instead of manually typing, if you choose to just click and input the department in the column, Excel gives you that option. However, the real reason why we are doing this is if by mistake you choose to type finance and you mistakenly type finance and you type in enter, it will tell you that this value does not match the data validation restriction defined for this cell. Can you all see the alert? So therefore, Excel is telling you that the data you're trying to input in this cell does not meet the validation criteria. Therefore, you either need to spell the data you're trying to input correctly, or if you are not able to, you have the option of just clicking on this drop down and then inputting from one of the options that have been made available to you. Cool? Are you all following, please?
Yeah, we are following.
Yes, sir.
So do you get the idea and what we have done simply by validating this range of cells only to input the values that we expect it to? We are going to do a second example, which will make the concept a bit much more clearer for you. Is that okay? But then again, so what it means is that when I'm inputting data and I get to this department column, I can decide to input the data, type it in, and immediately it matches the exact sales criteria, Excel will accept it. If it doesn't, it will tell you it doesn't. If you do not know what the options are to be inputted, all you need to do is click on this drop down, and then you can input the options that have been made available for you to add data to the worksheet so that you can be sure that every data that you are inputting in this particular column is accurate and it's exactly what you would expect at the end of the day to be able to do the further analysis that you expect to do. Is that okay? All right, so let's look at a second example on data validation, which would, I believe, will make the concept a bit much more clearer. Okay, so now we're going to focus on these three columns. And this time around, you realize that we have validated text, i.e. Text. This time we want to validate numbers. Is that okay? We are doing a second example of data validation. And this time I want to show you how to validate numbers. Now, a scenario that you could look at for validating numbers is when, for example, you are inputting data in a cell and you're supposed to input, for example, you see that the heading for this data is period. And we are assuming that this is investments that people have made for treasury bills, for example, for various periods, okay, at this rate, okay? And let's assume that, and for those of you who might be aware, you know that treasuries are only bought in these periods, i.e. 91 days, 182 days, and 365 days, which is a 1-year treasury bill. Are you all getting the concept I'm creating? So the question one will ask is, so assuming you are the one inputting data in this cell, should it be possible for anybody to enter 95 in this cell? Is the question I'll ask. Should it be possible? Knowing very well that the various periods by which people can buy treasuries are only 91, 182 days, and 365 days, which is 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. Should it be possible for anybody to enter 95 or enter 170 in this column? Should it be possible? I'm waiting for an answer.
No, please.
It should not be possible, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, you would agree that an ideal tool to use at this stage will be to validate this column to only accept these values. Does that make sense? So
yes,
that,
please.
yes. So it means that if we agree that these are the only periods people can do their investment periods, we shouldn't create room for anybody to enter any value other than the specified values that we know that people usually invest for. So that is the second example of data validation I want to introduce you to. So just like we did in the department, I want to highlight the column that I want to validate, okay? I go to the data tab. Again, go to the data validation option and click on data validation. And again, like you see from the first time, Excel will usually accept any value. That's how we can type 170 and 90 and Excel will accept it. But again, I don't want you to be able to type in any value. So I'm going to change the validation criteria. So instead of allow any value, I change it to, I want to provide Excel with a list of acceptable values that are accepted within this range of cells. Cool? Now, another way you can input a list of values is by separating them with commas when you get to the source. So rather than another option of selecting the source data, especially when the data is not many, you can manually type in the data and just separate them with commas. So this is another way by which you can input the source data, or to state it differently, this is another way you can input the list of acceptable values in the range of cells that we wish to validate. So we are telling Excel, look, Excel, if anybody enters any value other than these values that we are stating here, please don't accept it. As simple as ABC. That is the interpretation of all what we are trying to do on this dialog box. You are telling Excel that, look, Excel, for this range of cells, when anybody enters any value other than these values that we are inputting in this session, don't accept it. That is the simplest explanation you could give to what we have just done. And by just clicking OK, you notice again that the dialog box for the validated areas appears, and immediately you click on this drop down, you realize that the values that we inputted as the acceptable values appear for you to be able to input. And if you try to enter anything, for example, 45, other than what we have asked Excel to accept, it will tell you because the data doesn't match the data criteria, Excel will not accept that input, thereby saving. I mean, sometimes you are trying to type 182 genuinely, and then you mistakenly type 172. And maybe it was a genuine mistake, but due to this general validation tool that we have put in place, Excel will prompt you and ensure that you input the right values only, thereby ensuring the data accuracy and integrity of the entire data that you're compiling. Okay, so on that note, I'll bring the curtain close on data validation. And if there's any quick question, I'd like to take it before I move on to the next topic, audit trails. Any questions up to this point on data validation?
Yeah, please, I have a question.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Okay, sir. Suppose you do
Please,
the.
can you apply
Okay, so let's take.
So I'm moderating the questions. Thank you very much. So let's have, if you have a question, one of the way you can do it is to type in the comment box.
Okay.
You can also ask. So I saw the lady was asking the question first, and then followed by just put your name. Even if you put your name, I'll mention your name, and then we are good to go. Emmanuel, you have not received the files. How many of you have received the files? We shared it in the chat box. It's not to your email. We didn't send it by your email. We thought checking your email. So it's in the chat box. Ayam shared it at 10:48. If you have received it, please, yes. So Samuela, please, can you ask your question? Followed by Tijani. Anyone who wants to ask question, just drop your name in the chat box and I'll call you. Samuela, please talk.
Okay, so if I do the data validation somewhere else other than the place I really wanted it to be, how do I undo it?
Okay, very good question. So you happen to have validated, let's say you have validated this range of cells and you didn't want to validate this range of cells. So it's literally the same process we went through in doing the validation. You go through the same process in removing data validation. So again, on the home tab, you go to the data tab. So you highlight first the area you want to remove the validation from, if you no longer want it there. And then you go to the data tools and then click on data validation again, which will bring up the same data validation dialog box. And then beneath the data validation box, you will see this option here, clear all. So if somebody has sent you a sheet and it's been validated in a way and you no longer want to keep those validations, it's just a matter of going to the same data validation tool and then clicking on clear all. And then you realize that it defaults back to any value, meaning that any value can be inputted in that cell without any challenge. And you click OK, and you realize that the drop downs move away and you can be able to input any value in those cells. Thank you. Next question, please.
Okay, in Suana and all the people who have not received the file, there's a green, check the chat box, there's a green icon in the chat box. It's 31.14 kilobytes. Please just click on it and the file will be downloaded. It's called online training Excel. Thank you. So Tijani, can we take your question? In Nuansa, please download the file. I've just sent it. Mobile web gonna have 3, we've shared it 3 times. So please, you can find it.
I hope I answered your question. I'm not sure I got the name.
Okay, please, my question is.
Yes, please go ahead.
Please go ahead, Tijani. Please go
can I
ahead and
continue
ask
with the
your
question?
question. Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay, my question is, can you apply the validation rule after doing the entry?
That would not be
Can you apply the
ideal.
validation rule after doing it?
Okay, so I get the question. So Tijani is asking, can you now come and do validation after the data is being inputted? The answer is yes and no, because one, if you do it after the data has been inputted, it means that you are going to accept every error that was inputted before the data validation. And you are going to allow Excel to accept those validations. So ideally, you are supposed to apply your data validation rule. You need to know beforehand what kind of data you're expecting in your data sheets and apply your validation rules even before you start inputting your data. So ideally, like I would advise as a consultant, you need to apply your data validation rules first, usually before you input your data. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. If there are no questions, I'll move on to the next topic, audit trail.
Please, there is a last question. Amin is asking, is there a way to lock the set of validated values coming from a point where someone who really wants to compromise the integrity of the data can just edit the set of the validated values? This is from Amin.
Okay, Florence, can you take that again, please?
Okay, so what it means is that if the cell is validated with the values, is there a way to lock it up, maybe password protected? Because if somebody wants to compromise the integrity of the data, I just have to go point, where is the validation, just edit it and enter what I want.
Okay. Okay. So yes, that's a very, very good question. So as another layer of protection that you might want to do to protect your data, if you do not want further entries or further modifications to the data that you are inputting, yes, there's a way of protecting the cells. So from that point, you are moved from just guiding or aiding people or yourself from inputting wrong data, but you're also going a step further to put a password protection for anybody who wants to edit a range of cells. So that will fall under data protection or cell protection, which, okay, if I can go over briefly, there are sheet protection tools that can be used. So if you go to the review tab, after you've done the data validation and you go to the review tab, you can actually protect sheet. You can see there's a password, a padlock icon on this protection. If you use this protect sheet icon, it will allow you to input a password and then verify your password. And when you do this, what Excel does is before anybody can edit or make any changes to this document, you will need to provide that password before further changes can be made to the document. I'm sure that answers your question. So yes, if you need to move a step further from just preventing people from moving errors, you go to the review tab and then protect the sheet and put in your own password so that anybody who wants to edit, if you don't want any unauthorized access and editing on your worksheet, the person will need that password before they can make any changes to your document. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. Prosper and Co, the file has been uploaded like 4 times. If you still can't find it, there's a Google Doc link that has been posted just by Ariam at Legal. Please just click on the link and then do it. Please, over to you, Mr. Co.
Okay, so I'm sure you all appreciate the concept of data validation at this point. The reason I've had to bring us back is we can't just start trying to analyze a set of data without, so I'm trying to let you know, okay, these are some of the things you can do to make sure that the data you're analyzing is accurate. That is the reason we've had to go through all of this. Okay, so just appreciate bringing you back a step further to teach you how you can ensure that the data you're inputting is accurate. And then I'll quickly teach you how to investigate or look for errors or trace errors if there are any in the worksheets that you are working with using auditing tools in Excel. So moving on to our next topic, we are trying to look at data auditing or audit trails in Excel. Now, on this sheet, which you would also have a copy of, this is a sample data that we are using for illustrating this topic. And in this sheet, we have data of products that we sell, the sales that we've made for the various months. They are total sales, which is a summation of the January-February figure, the cost of those production, how much profits we made, what is the average sales for the month. So the data is quite self-explanatory. But sometimes, because this is a very simple data, it's easy for you to have a complete overview on this data. Now, you notice that there is group 1 and group 2, and then there are averages for both groups. Like all the data here seems to be linked to something. The point I want to illustrate here using this auditing tool is if you go to the formula tab, if you go to the home and you go to the formula tab, in Excel, you see formula auditing. There are these tools here called trace precedent and then trace dependence. Okay, this is a very simple tool I want to introduce you to, and that is to say that if I pick any value at all, okay, in any worksheets that you are working in, and you realize that you've done various summation, you've done some averages of some values, you've done a number of things which are giving you results, but you want to be able to pick a figure and trace what values or what formulas does this value depend on. So when you go to the formula, so I just put my cursor on one of the cells, and then I go to the formula tab and I click on trace dependence. You can see Excel has automatically drawn some lines on the sheet. You'll be wondering where these lines are coming from. The explanation is simple. What Excel is telling you that if you take this value is feeding, you can see that the first arrow ends in the total column. Can you all see that? And then again, it goes again to feed into the average sales. What this is telling you is that, okay, this figure is feeding into the total summation value. That is the explanation. And then it is also being used in computing the average sales. Average sales. Do you get a picture? So that if I pick any value whatsoever and I want to know, okay, so another example will be taking this value and then tracing dependence. And then you realize that, I mean, the figure might look here, you might not know that, oh, this value is also being used in computing the average of both groups. And usually this is used in auditing works that you might have not done yourself. You have to work with a worksheet and you want to really understand what is going on with the computation on the worksheet. So you can easily use this formula auditing tool to give you an idea of what values are feeding into what and how the summation values are being derived at. If you are comfortable and you clearly understand what is going on, you can easily just go back to remove arrows, and then Excel will clear all the arrows on the sheet to give you a clearer picture. The opposite of trace dependent is trace precedence. So when you're looking at trace precedence, the precedence is what are the values feeding into this formula. So precedence will suggest that you have a formula and then you want to know what are the values that are accounting for this formula or where the figures are coming from to arrive at a figure. So I can just pick any value and then I say trace precedence. I can pick any value and say trace precedence. And Excel will tell me that, okay, this value that you are seeing here is made up of this value and this value. This value that you are seeing here is made up of a summation of all these values. You see how clearly Excel demarcates this value to enable you understand the data that you are trying to analyze. Cool. Are we all on the same page? Are you all following, please?
Yes, please.
So this is a very simple auditing tool that can be used in investigating or trying to drill down a sheet that you are trying to analyze, and it's becoming difficult for you to know how the values were arrived at and where the figures are coming from and whatnot. Another option that you might also want to look at is also this show formulas. If you pick any worksheet at all, and still on the formula tab beside the trace precedence and trace dependent, if you click on this show formulas tab, you'll notice that Excel will automatically open up. Rather than you seeing the formulas only in the formula bar, Excel will open up the entire worksheet and tell you and show you everything that is accounting or how the values that you are looking at in the worksheet is being derived. Okay, so it's just a quick toggle for you to see, okay, what are the formulas? Maybe you know what formula you wanted to write in this sheet. If I want to get a quick overview of all the formulas on the worksheet and know whether I'm doing the right thing or not, this show formulas button on the formulas tab can help you quickly. And once you turn it off, it closes up the worksheet to its original state. Is that okay? Okay, so another topic I would like to treat on auditing our worksheet is, I'm sure most of you, since you said you have worked with Excel before, there are times you are doing something and then you realize you are getting some errors, okay? So for example, let me create some errors. I just want to delete this data, okay? And then, for example, you delete something somewhere and then you see divisor errors. This is a divisor by zero errors. Has anyone come across this error before? Anyone?
Yes, please.
Yes. You notice sometimes people get scared. They don't seem to understand what is going on when they see these errors on their worksheet. One way of tracing those errors when you come to the formula tab under the formula auditing is to go to the trace error checking, and then go to trace error. And then it will tell you that this divisor error, this thing is trying to add values and divide by the number of occurrences. And you realize that because we can usually not divide by zero, Excel detects that because there are these are zero values and we're dividing by zero, it is telling you or trying to give you an idea for the source of the error that you are looking at. Is that okay? So that is another quick way you can use to audit or investigate the data you are working with, should you have any challenge in trying to analyze any data set that you are working with. All right, any questions up to this point on auditing and tracing errors and tracing the source of our data in working with Excel auditing tools? Are we all clear with this?
Yes, please.
If there's any question, I would like to take it before we look at almighty pivot table, where we do some basic data analysis using pivot tables. Are there any questions, please?
Is there any question? If there are no questions, we can go.
Okay. Okay, all right, thank you. It means I'm doing something right. It means everybody is following, right? That's super cool. Okay, so has anybody here heard about pivot tables?
Yeah.
Pivot tables is a very powerful tool used in data analysis, okay? And in front of you, which is the original data that we want to analyze, okay? I just want to do a quick experiment. I just want to do a quick experiment based on what your preference will be. Assuming you had to look at these two sets of data. So on the first sheet, we are looking at a raw pivot data. And what we are looking at here is just a data that has been compiled for training programs that has been held, for example. Okay, so we know the prices, we know the number of days, we know the total value that was paid. And you see there are various, so this is a training company that provides training, and there are various salesperson that tries to make the sales. So in short, that is what this data you are looking at is trying to tell you. But you would realize again that this doesn't tell us anything if you compare it to a data set like this. Because at the end of the day, so compare this data that you are looking at here to this data that you are looking at here. If you are the manager of this company, which of these two data sets would you appreciate based on the data that you are looking at? Would you prefer this data set, which is telling us the same story, or you prefer this data set that allows you to actually look at sales based on particular salespersons and then give you real-time analysis based on the data that we are looking at? Which of these would you prefer?
The second one.
You prefer the second one, right? Why? Why, if I may ask, why would you prefer the second one?
Okay, so firstly, firstly, it's colorful, it's attractive. And then secondly, it's easier to see, because of the bars. If I'm to take the first one, I have to analytically look at the figures and ask myself which one is greater. But the second one, the bars are already telling me which one is greater and which one is shorter and which one. And it's making it easy for me to compare the values.
Very good. So in short, all what you have said is that the second data is helping us to tell a story. True? It's telling a much clearer story in the second data. And then this is a very simple data. I mean, you could have much huge data sets to analyze. And if you are not able to tell stories with the data, I mean, anybody who looks at the data set will not be able to make any meaning out of the data. Is that okay? So it's important that we have some of these tools at our fingertips to help us tell stories, like they say, a picture says 1,000 words, right? You just look at this picture and, okay, you can tell what is going on. You can tell which companies we are selling to. You can tell which salesperson is doing what. I mean, it tells a story. And we all like things simplified for us at the end of the day. So let's go back just to our original data, and let's look at how we can create our own pivot table, assuming you have your own data set and you want to tell a story out of the data. Because by just looking at all what we were doing to input and audit the data and make sure our data is validated, all of that is not the end game. The reason why we collect data is to be able to make informed decisions out of the data. Do we all agree on that? Because if our essence is just to collect the data and not do anything, make decisions out of it, then we might as well stop bothering ourselves collecting the data. So therefore, if we have data sets, it's imperative that we be able to analyze them, tell a story out of them, and ultimately be able to make informed decisions and tell, okay, which of our salespersons is not pulling his weight, which regions is giving us the most sales, where should we focus our energies on, where should we channel our sales drive on. I mean, those are the kind of decisions and again, everything I'm saying is just to give you a perspective based on the industry data I'm looking at. And this can apply to so many other data sets based on the industry data. I mean, banking, oil and gas, sales, marketing, depending on the data sets that you are looking at. Ultimately, once you're able to tell a story out of the data, it helps to simplify things for everybody. So let's go back to our data set and look at how we can tell a very simple story out of this data. For those of you who says you have used pivot before, I'm sure what you are used to anytime you're trying to analyze a data via pivot table is usually to highlight the data sets. I'm sure that is what you usually do, but I'm here to tell you today that anytime you want to analyze data sets, there are just some key things that you need to be wary of that will save you the time of not having to select the entire data, assuming the data is quite huge. And I see people trying to select data sets and then they go all the way and then they go past the bottom and then you're scrolling all the way, you're trying to find the end of the data and you go past it. I'm sure people have found yourself doing that before. So all you need to do is to ensure that there are no blank rows. Okay, so for example, when I say there are no blank rows, this is an example of a blank row in the data. So if I want to analyze all of this data and there's a blank row here, this is going to cause trouble for my data analysis because Excel is going to treat this part of the data separately from this part of the data. So therefore, all I need to ensure is that there are no blank rows in this column. And then all I need to do is put my cursor within the data set that I want to analyze. Pivot tables are things you insert. That is one way I know where to look for on the tabs when I'm looking to insert the pivot table. So if I put my cursor within the data table and go to the insert tab, it's usually the first option. On the insert tab to the left, you see an option here called pivot tables. Okay, so if I click on pivot tables, you will notice that I didn't need to select my entire data, but because my cursor was within the data set, Excel will automatically highlight the entire data set for me to be able to analyze. Is that okay? The next option is whether we want the pivot in a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. Okay, and usually I like to insert my pivot table on a new worksheet so I can get option to analyze my data properly. So I'll just leave the new worksheet option checked and then I say okay. So you realize that it's brought us to a new worksheet. You might be wondering where our data is gone. A new sheet, if you notice, a new sheet has been created and our original data is still sitting on the sheet before that. Sorry, the sheet after that. And then our pivot sheet has been created where we can do our pivot table analysis. Are we all following? So what is going to happen is we are going to analyze this data. And because of the data headings that we have in the column, Excel has detected all the field names that we can analyze based on the data that we have selected. So you can see the field names, the total value, the customers, the salesperson, the courses, all of those field names have been clearly identified when we come onto our pivot data table. So this is where now, when we talk about pivots, what comes to mind? I mean, when we say pivot, the word pivot, what comes to mind when you hear the word pivot? Any answer? What comes to mind?
A turning point.
Guys, can you hear me? A turning point. Good. Good. So that's lovely. So just like our brother just said, the whole idea behind pivot table is if you have to analyze this data just by the way it was created, you are unable to turn the data around and do various kinds of analysis. And that is the option or the alternative this pivot table is going to give you. It's going to give you the option to be able to turn the data and present it whichever way you please. Now, the key areas to look at when we are creating our pivot is this 4 columns that we have here. So what we are going to do is tell Excel, okay, there's a column for courses, there's a column for prices, there's a column for days, values, customers, and salesperson. Now you realize that these 4 columns are currently blank. It is up to you to decide based on your own pivot analysis and how you want to present your data to determine which of these data columns you want to show in the columns and what data you want to show in the rows and which data you want. Obviously, data that you want to show summation values should be data that contains values. So for example, you cannot put salesperson's data that doesn't contain values in the values column because that column does not contain value. Let me go back. You realize that this data does not contain values. So it will not make sense for you to put that data in the values column. So let's create an example so you see what I'm trying to say. So to create our own pivot table, it's just a matter of clicking and then dragging these field names into any one of these 4 columns. And then the last option is the filter column. If you want to filter, assuming you have date and you want data filtered by date, you usually will put that in the filter column. So in this case, for example, I want to show my salespeople in the rows. So all I need to do is click on the sales and then drag it to the rows, for example, and see what happens in real time. You realize that Excel automatically is displaying all the unique salespeople that are existing in this data set. Excel is displaying them here. Assuming, okay, after seeing these salespeople, I want to know which customers they sold to for the period in question. So again, I go and click on customers. And then, for example, I show the customers in the columns section. So straight away, you see my table is automatically building. A report is being built based on these activities that I'm doing to the right of my Excel sheets. Are you all following what is happening? So now we have our salespeople, we have the companies that is sold to. And then I'm sure the most relevant information at this point is how much worth of sales or training did they make, did each of these sales persons make to each of those companies. So all I do now is to, for example, click on the value column. I mean, once you click on the value, it automatically will go to the values column because Excel detects that it is data that contains values. So it will show in the values column. And just like that, you can see that we have built a very simple report made up of all the salespeople, the total sales each of them made, and to which companies they made those sales to, and giving us a grand report. This is another version of this very data, but analyzed in a different format. I mean, you are not limited to this. You can choose to, for example, bring the customers to the rows and then move the salespeople to the columns. It's just a matter of drag and drop. And just like our brother said, you can see how this table is pivoting. That's where the origin of the name, you realize that you can turn the table or the data around to give you the data report, however you choose to present this data in whatever format. So just like that. So for example, I can add additional report, assuming I don't want to see just the customers. I want to see what what courses each of the customers bought. So by just clicking on courses and dragging it down to the courses column, see what happens. You realize that it tells me the company, it tells me which particular trainings we sold to this company, and which salesperson did those trainings for what amount, giving me a very detailed report for the data that we are looking at. Are we all following? And this is a very powerful tool that can be used to perform any kind of data analysis that you are looking at. I mean, there's a very in-depth course about pivot tables. Again, because of the time constraint, I just want to introduce you to this whole concept. I mean, if you are curious enough, I can see the curious one digging a bit deeper after this section to see what other possibilities there are that they may be able to use this pivot tables tool for. So for example, again, after doing all of this, to complete telling our story, one would want to draw a pivot chart, just like we saw in our earlier example, to better tell the story that we want to tell. So it is all to your discretion based on the nature of the report that you want to create and the story that you want to tell. So to complete this, let's quickly insert, what do you call it? A chart based on this data that we have plotted, okay? So I can quickly just, once your pivot data is selected, and I go to my pivot data tab, I can quickly just go and insert a simple 2D or 3D bar graph to tell the story that I want to tell. And by just clicking on the chart, you notice that a graph is inserted automatically. Just a minute. So we go to insert, and then we go to, if I want to do bar, you can change the chart type if you want. There are so many chart types to choose from. So you can go to the insert tab with your data anywhere selected on your pivot, and then you can go to your chart section and then insert any chart type that you prefer. And straight away, you can tell the kind of story that we are seeking to tell with the data that you have plotted. I mean, unlike this tool that we are using, to be able to get to this stage and tell a story with just this data that we are looking at, it would have taken you so many formulas and steps and hours of data analysis to be able to get your data into this format without the use of data tools. So again, this is a very powerful tool that can help you quickly analyze, summarize, and then tell better stories with whichever data that you have. And it doesn't matter the size of the data. It can be 1,000 rows, it can be 1,000,000 rows. Pivot table has the ability of analyzing, summarizing, and then telling better stories with this kinds of data generally. If we are done with this now, and again, you are not also compelled to only do one type of analysis with just this data. After doing this, so I can call this sheet customer review. Okay, I can rename this. I can go back again, assuming I wanted another analysis based on the same data set. It's just a matter of going back to my original table, okay, putting my cursor in my original, and you realize that in doing all of this analysis, we haven't touched, edited, or done anything to our original data, which is still intact. That tells you I can come back to this data again and perform another analysis or another report type that I am interested in looking at by going again and go to insert new pivot table. And you realize that it will create another sheet. Let's say this time I want to do a sales rep report. And another sheet will be created also based on this same original data. And I can be able to create another pivot table based on whatever criteria that you may decide. And as simple as ABC, it's just an issue of drag and drop. And I have created another report based on salespeople and how much each of these salespeople sold for the period in question. Again, if I want to plot this, it's just a matter of putting my cursor on the data table, going to insert, and I can easily plot this on a graph again to tell me a better story. Depends on the chart type. I can again go to insert graph and then insert a graph type. If you want to change the chart design, you can always change the chart design. And straight away, we can tell how much each of these salespeople and who is making the best sales. I mean, you can see how easy this is compared to just looking at this raw data and not being able to tell what is going on at what point in time. So on that note, that introduces you to the concept of pivot table when you are trying to, I mean, this is a very powerful tool. Like I said, this is just a tip of the iceberg, a very tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of things that you can do when it comes to pivot table. Let me give you one example. So for example, I can, aside doing all of this report, I can also come back to pivot and then insert what we call a slicer. Okay, if I go to the pivot analysis and I go to insert slicer, and then let's say I want to be able to create a slicer for salesperson and then customers. You see what I mean very soon. So this will bring this to dialog box on your worksheet. What these slicers do is it creates a filter sort of, so that this data that you are looking at is looking at data for all the salespeople and all the sales they made to all of these companies. So what if I want to see the sales that only Allison made? It's just a matter of me clicking on this Allison tab. And then if I want to, for example, I want a sale for a particular individual or for multiple people, I can just click for that in comparison to each other. And then in real time, you see how powerful this is. In real time, Excel gives me a real-time analysis of all of the salespeople in question. And that's a real-time analysis. So, I mean, this is just to give you an idea of how powerful indeed this whole pivot table is and how it can help you analyze and then tell better stories with the data that you are looking at. I mean, it's the best free tool you are looking at if you are looking at any serious data analysis. So on that note, I want to bring a curtain down. Nunya Afari is the name, Mr. Kulam. I'll pause for this at this point for any questions that you may have on pivot table. Florence, please, am I on time or I'm early?
Yes, we are supposed to end at 11:45. You're on time. So we need a video. Yes, so it's time to take questions. Mr. Cool is on the line. He wants cool questions as well. So please, yes. So kindly send us your question if you have any questions, something you don't understand. What we advocate for is for you to really practically get what we are teaching today. If you don't get it and you miss it, this is a free session, you know. Getting it will be difficult. Mukaila said, please, we will need a video. I was left behind due to network issues. Okay, Mukaila, the video will be made, we'll make the video available on YouTube and you can go back and learn it. Please, can he go back and show how he did the slicer part? Okay, that's your question. The sorting of the slicer. Okay, he'll go back to that. This is from Idrisu. Who else has a question to?
Okay.
Okay. So someone wants to, so this is the agenda
All right,
we have.
So let me take.
We'll be taking from here, we'll take some few minutes break. And we'll take some few minute break, then we'll break into sessions. There'll be sessions on cleaning data using R, which is an interesting session you should join. And we'll have Google Fusion table by one of our experienced facilitators as well. So if you haven't sent the link to your friends, I see some other people joining. So we have Stephen Mautodonko, who will be facilitating a session, cleaning up data and using Google Studio instead, sorry, visualizing data using Google Studio. And then we would have cleaning data for analysis using R. They are the two breakout sessions we have. Don't miss out. Send your link to your other colleagues to join as well. So we will take from 11:45, 5-minute break, and then we will come back and join the various sessions. Please go ahead, Afari.
Okay, so so on the question on sliders, so the idea behind sliders, it's what we call real-time filters on graphs, so that if I have done a report just like we are looking at, but I want to be able to, you see, what the sliders do is, rather than go and create a new pivot table altogether to do a different kind of analysis, the sliders give you an opportunity to filter based on different criteria, and then it gives you a real-time report based on the graph that you are looking at. So what I'm saying is, after you have created your pivot, after you have inserted your graph, and you would want to be able to analyze or filter or look at the same graph based on different criteria. You want to look at the same graph based on different criteria. What you do is, when you go to the pivot table analysis, when your pivot is selected, under the options, you see this option here called slicer. And the slicer will be made up of all the data columns that we are using to build our pivot table. So it's a matter of you selecting where you want, which of the data sets you want your slicers on. So let's say I want slicer based on courses. Okay, let's use just this example. And then I say, okay. So you realize that, yeah, so now we are looking at this report, and we are currently displaying how much each of all of these salespeople made for all of these courses. Okay, so all of these salespeople, assuming I want to see only how much access training they sold. If I click on the access training, you realize that it's telling me that only 3 people sold access training. You see how real time this data is transforming using our pivot table analysis and then our pivot graph analysis. And I'm sure you would have seen this thing somewhere, and you'd be wondering, how did they go about this? This might take some divine engineering to create this worksheet, but you are sitting right here in front of me, and I have created all of this data just looking at raw data, and I've analyzed it all the way up to this point. So I don't want to see access. Okay, I want to see how many people sold Excel training. And in real time, it's giving me a real-time analysis of who sold Excel, who sold the most, who sold less, you know, in that order. If I want to select multiple, okay, I want to see PowerPoint and Excel, I can be able to select multiple, and then it is giving me for people, the sales rep who have sold. So, I mean, like I said, pivot is a really powerful tool. For the curious, once again, I'm challenging you, take a deep dive into these functionalities, and you'll be amazed some of the data analysis that you can perform with pivot tables and slices. Any further questions, please?
Yes, I see questions. How do we have to master formulas for those without statistical background? And this is from Dennis. And Dennis, as you can see, this is not, even what he's doing is not even for statistician. It's even like, I study psychology and sociology. I'm now doing completely something different from my field. So please, I will throw the question back to you, but what I want to say is that if you really want to do something, you will do it. It doesn't matter if you have statistics background or you have an arts background, like you are in a performing arts, you are acting drama and other things. If you really want to do it, you do it. Yes. So please, what he did is not for statisticians, it's for ordinary people. And it's the more reason we are organizing this workshop.
Yes.
Someone
yes,
said it provides graphical representation, which is easier to interpret and comprehend. Okay. Someone said, can I have the recording? Can I have the recording from Johnson Prosper? You sent your email, we'll capture that and try. And Linda, please, can you capture his email? He said he wants the recording by email. We'll provide that to you. Okay. And so please, Linda has just shared a form. Please let's evaluate how you find this session. How do you see the Excel session? If it's a session, are there anything you want to recommend, things you want to do? Linda, please reshare it in the link again. Please, we will need the video. Yes, we'll send the video. Can you complete the session? Yes. Okay. When is the program starting? And oopsie, sorry, I think it just, so there is no more question. If there's no more question, we take a break. The forms can be filled, please. Okay.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much for joining my session. It was fun. I hope you learned a lot. I always say, oh, for me, I mean, I also didn't start my career learning Excel. We're balancing books, and it was just out of curiosity and passion. It doesn't matter whether you read agric or sociology. I mean, what we are looking at here, everybody, irrespective, once you call yourself a graduate, you should be able to interpret and analyze this kind of data. So all it takes is a bit of curiosity and passion, and then you can be able to do some of these things. It sets you apart, wherever you are. Immediately you begin to transform and analyze data in this manner. It tells people, okay, this person knows what he's doing. He's telling better stories with his data, and I'm sure you'd enjoy the part from there. Thank you very much once again. Nunya Afari is the name. Catch me on LinkedIn or Facebook. Let's keep the conversation going. If you have any challenge, please feel free to contact me. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your sessions. Goodbye.